All the sisters of mercy, they are not departed or gone. They were waiting for me when I thought that I just can't go on. Well, they brought me their comfort, and later they brought me this song. Oh, and I hope you run into them, you who've been waiting so long. You must leave everything that you cannot control. Well, it starts with your family. It soon comes around to your soul. Now I've been where you're hanging, I think I can see how you're pinned. When you're not feeling holy, your loneliness says that you've sinned. Lay down beside me, I made my confession to them. They touched both my eyes, and I touched the dew on their hem. If your life is a leaf that the seasons tear off and condemn, bind you with love that is graceful and green as a stem. When I left, they were sleeping. I hope you run into them soon. Don't turn on the light. You can read their address by the moon. And you won't make me jealous if I hear that they've sweetened your night. We weren't lovers like that, and besides it would still be all right. Lovers like that, and besides, it would still be all right. Hi, I'm David Peliquin, and some of you may know me from the website Cohencentric.com, absolutely marvelous website that is run by Alan Showalter, and I've been fortunate enough to have a few of my essays published with Alan, and we have decided to work on a new project together, and this is my first attempt to explain what it is we think we might be doing. The subject is the Consolamentum, which is a word that specifically applies to the Cathars. They were part of the Albigensian heresy, and the Consolamentum was a sacrament for them. But we're using it today in a larger frame, you might say. The frame is the consolation of the poet and the poet's relationship to the muse, you might say. I guess we could call it. Robert Bly once said that the poet deals with what he calls the feminine voice, because the poetry comes in a form that is feminine in tone, and I always like that idea. And my research has taken me back to shamanic times, which is the first place that you begin to see this marvelous continuity of the shamanic masters of 100,000 years ago, listening to the voice of the universe. And Rasmussen, the anthropologist, who spent a lot of time in the Arctic Circle, interviewed a shaman, and that shaman told him that the soul of the universe, the voice of the soul of the universe, was feminine. It was a high, squeaky voice, he said. And she has this one message. The message is, be not afraid of the universe. And I think that's a good place to start. What I'm sharing with you today is actually a draft of what will become, I think, an essay on Leonard Cohen's beautiful song, Sisters of Mercy. It'll be a lot different than what I share with you today, probably, because that's the way drafts go. So this is a work in progress, something I do once in a while. I share with a small group of people, usually, a work in progress, but I'm guessing that more than just a few people will be watching this. Some of you may be familiar with the work of Ken Wilber. He wrote a wonderful book called Up from Eden. And it's one that I recommend because he really talks about this. This is where I got the reference to Rasmussen and the shamanic origins of this friendly voice that says, do not be afraid of the universe. For me, personally, what happens is although many people consider me a scholar, I'm more of a meditator. And when I encounter the beauty of a poem, song like Sisters of Mercy, I do some scholarly research. But mostly what I do is I drop into it personally, which I believe is what Leonard was asking us to do when he said that he created what he called a sanctuary of song, and everyone's invited. So that's the thrust of this. We're going to be also talking about the English poet Robert Graves. He's an essayist, and he was an essayist and a poet, famous for I, Claudius, some of you may remember, from the BBC. And Robert Graves had a lifetime relationship with the muse, similar to Leonard Cohen's in some ways, and in other ways very different. But we'll get into that in a minute. One of the things that I liked about Robert Graves is that he said you shouldn't lecture about poetry. He said that it's confidential. You're sharing, the poet is sharing something of their own direct experience. And there's nothing more boring than listening to some scholar drone on about Emily Dickinson or Emerson or Leonard Cohen and not capture some of the beauty and the wonder and to confess that. So I'm making my confession right here. I love the work of Leonard Cohen. It inspires me. It helps me in my own personal meditation and also the students that I teach. And so that's the frame that I'm going to put this in. This is a quote from Robert Graves that I like very much. You direct yourself to that moon goddess who is reigning for you at the moment, and there is nothing else in the world. A true poem starts in a poetic trance. We don't use the word trance so much anymore. And we have better language these days, states of consciousness, for instance. And although this talk isn't going to be about states of consciousness, that certainly comes into this. They used to call it trance, and we can still use that. But basically, what we know now is that a lot of creative work happens in a space that moves into what in brainwave study would be an alpha state or an alpha diaphanous state, or if it's really truly a visionary state, what's called waking theta. And that's a little science that we won't delve into too deeply, but we know now that this is true. And the interesting thing is that when Leonard Cohen talks about entering into that sanctuary of song, he doesn't talk about ideas. He said, I don't really have ideas. That's a little bit of a joke, I think. But what he's trying to point to is the imagery. Waking theta is a visionary state of consciousness where a poet, an artist, is in a place of reverie, and images are coming rather than ideas. Rather than ideas coming that are cognitive, there are things come as a kind of gestalt, a cascade. And certainly that's true, I think, of Robert Graves and many of the descriptions that Leonard has given us. Something like that's happening. So, they lay down beside me, I made my confession to them. One of the most important lines in Sisters of Mercy. The confession again, confidentiality. Leonard's confessing. So, all the Sisters of Mercy, they have not departed or gone. I like the fact that the first word is all. A lot of people leave that out, meaning that some of the Sisters of Mercy, you might say, have departed. What does he mean by that? Well, I think that Leonard, along with many, many other poets for the last few centuries, have lamented the exile of the feminine divine, the diminishment of the muse, of poetic inspiration, in place of what Robert Graves would call a love affair with the god Apollo and reason. There's nothing wrong with reason, but you don't tend to get really good poetry out of reason. So Leonard is calling for, I think, a balance, restoration of the balance of the feminine and the masculine. And if you've read my essay on the language of symbolism in Leonard Cohen, his wonderful image of the unified heart, the two triangles that form the Star of David, one male, one female, coming together in one heart, is his imagery. And that certainly is what he's talking about in some way in most of his work, certainly in this song. So they were waiting for me when I thought that I just can't go on. What does that mean? Well, this reminded me of that marvelous Kurosawa cut. It reminded me of that wonderful Kurosawa film Dreams, one of his later films. And it's called The Blizzard, the sequence. And in it, some mountain climbers are climbing surrounded by this terrible blizzard. Kurosawa himself was a mountain climber. And you can see that they're failing. They're all, one by one, exhausted and falling into the snow. And the leader is the only one that's left standing, and he's trying desperately to rouse them and to save them. And while he's attempting to do this, a figure appears to him, a snow goddess, if you will. She actually is a Japanese snow woman whose name is Yuki Onna, and she appears in times of near death, you might say, and she's often seen as a dark figure and sort of standing at the doorway of death. But she, as these things go, it's always a little more complicated than that. So in the sequence, The Blizzard, the leader sees her and encounters her, and she's seducing him into sleep, and he eventually succumbs, and one would think that that's the end of it. But the scene changes, and the blizzard has passed, and the men are waking up, and they realize that they're actually on the edge of their camp, and that she actually, you might say, either led them to safety or was there to protect them in their sleep until morning. That's the kind of idea. So this is a very, very, very old idea that in the exhaustion of the one who is seeking comes a moment when you can't go on. And that's the vulnerable moment, and the moment often when the feminine figure, the muse, the feminine divine, the Japanese snow goddess, will appear, you might say. And it's a very old story, thousands of years old, and it takes many different forms. So Leonard's got it right here in the song. They brought me their comfort, and later they brought me this song. Oh, I hope you run into them, you who've been traveling so long. Comfort's another word for consolamentum. The idea of comfort is to come alongside, to console, not because of death. We use that word in a very limited way these days, to console someone who has lost a loved one, for instance. But the consolation of the Inuit people is more universal, more cosmic, more non-dual, if you will. It's existential. Those are a lot of big words that mean the same thing, that it's in some way, this consolation is outside of time and space. It's a consolation that has to do with what's absolutely true, or what's eternally true, rather than what is lost in time or on the continuum of time. That's the sense of it. So this idea that one is traveling, this is a traveler, Leonard Cohen, of course, a seeker, you might say, after truth, exhausted, and finally meets the Sisters of Mercy. Now, who are the Sisters of Mercy? There's no way to know who the Sisters of Mercy are. Certainly not the story that Leonard tells about the two hitchhikers, which, you Leonard Cohen people know about. That's sort of the introductory story, but the deeper story, of course, is always something more. So, you who must leave everything that you cannot control, it starts with your family and soon comes around to your soul. Robert Graves was in World War I, and he knew T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. And Lawrence once told Robert Graves that when we have discounted every social convention, we may find ourselves separate and alone. When we know these conventions as social constructions, these are things that we made up, that's the sense of it that Lawrence was trying to get across to Graves, that the true poet in some way has to leave the construction of their family of origin, even has to leave the society to some degree, and go off into the desert, you might say. And that's a necessary step for the poet. The poet can then return as a seer, as in Jewish Kabbalah, a tzaddik, one who knows, as a prophet, or what Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell called a mystagogue. It's another fancy word that simply means one who goes off by him or herself to find and bring back what is missing from the age that person lives in. It happens in every generation, happens in every time frame all through history, and the great poets seem to bring to civilization something that's been missing. And certainly this business of the feminine muse is something that poets have been trying to bring back into Western civilization for a long time. So that's the sense of that. I just want to say one thing here about meaning, because this gets very confusing sometimes. I don't think it's useful to talk about the meaning of a poem or the meaning of a song. In a sense, that's what kills a poem or a song. Leonard said something to the effect of, if any one of my songs or poems should ever require a single meaning, then the song has failed. And I think what he's saying is that the song or the poem ought to be a gateway to your own meditation. You yourself enter into it. You're invited into the song, into the poem, and you have a personal experience with that. And I think that's the better word perhaps is I use the word meditation or perspective. So this is a perspective on all of this. This is not what I think the poem means. I've been where you're hanging. I think I can see how you're pinned. When you're not feeling holy, your loneliness says that you've sinned. Well, being a former Catholic and an altar boy at that, I know all about this one. It's a corruption of the mystic sense of loneliness, which I'll get to in a second. But this is the kind of thing that happens in exoteric religion very often, is if you're not feeling holy because you're in the right relationship within the dogmas of your faith, then you feel like you've sinned. And so you're caught within the horns of that dilemma. And as I said, certainly personally have experienced that. So this is a quote from Anne-Marie Schimmel. She was a great Sufi scholar and a mystic herself. She wrote a beautiful book called The Mystical Dimensions of Islam. And if you're interested in the Sufi aspects of Leonard Cohen's work, I strongly urge you to read her. This is her quote about the longing and loneliness. Only longing gives the soul bird the capacity to sing, inspiring it to create lovely melodies. Longing is the highest state of the soul, the highest it can reach, for it results in creativity, whereas union brings about silence and annihilation. And by annihilation, she's talking about fana, which is the annihilation of the little ego. And so when that happens in this union, the song stops. So it's a really sweet, lovely conceit that the songbird, which of course in Leonard Cohen is that beautiful nightingale that sits beneath the branch of holly, and his hummingbird, and other birds as well. They're spirit birds, and they're symbolic of the song of longing to resolve the inattentions of the soul. And the song reaches out for to the universe, and the universe may speak back and say, "Do not be afraid." There's a sense of it again. There's a wonderful quote, by the way, I just found this. Let's see if I've got it in my notes here. Yes, here it is. It's attributed to Irving Layton, of course, Leonard Cohen's older friend, and who I think in some ways mentored him. They were good friends for many years. And this is an interesting quote concerning this business of the Consolamentum. Quote, "A poet is deeply conflicted, and it's in his work that he reconciles those deep conflicts. The place is the harbor. It doesn't set the world in order, you know. It's the place of reconciliation. It's the Consolamentum, the kiss of peace." So Layton, this was in Layton's lexicon, perhaps first, and my guess is that Leonard and Layton talked about this often. And so I haven't followed the quote down actually where it comes from. There's just one source so far, so we scholars like to see if we can find the original source. So I'm still looking for that. And when I publish the essay, maybe by then I'll have found it. All right. So, "They lay down beside me, I made my confession to them. They touched both my eyes, I touched the dew on their hem." He says it right out. I made my confession to them. What's the confession? What's the nature of this kind of confession? The nature of the confession is that one has had the experience and you confess the experience. And this is Leonard's way of saying that he's with the Sisters of Mercy. There's nothing much you can say about it other than it's an embrace, giving into the embrace and being embraced by the mystery. And he makes his confession to them. They touched both my eyes, and I touched the dew on their hem. The eyes, the two eyes, I think, refer to the outer eye of flesh or mind, and what's called the inner eye of spirit. And so the touching here by the guru or the teacher, or symbolically touching it or thinking about it, opens up the inverted mystical vision. This is a very ancient idea, and it's usually associated with the third eye between the eyebrows. It's all through Sufism. And when that eye opens, one sees as a mystic sees. And it doesn't mean that the other eye closes. It just means that the inner eye becomes the default, you might say, for reality. The deeper reality is the inner vision. So that's the sense of it. And then I touch the dew on their hem. That's just a hint that this happens at night. This is a night vigil with the Sisters of Mercy. And as they leave in the morning, he's blessed by touching the hem with the dew. And this is also a very old idea. And it's called sometimes the fruitful darkness, this night vigil. Certainly Emerson talked about it, Thoreau talked about it, all the great poets talk about it. You're in a relationship with the infinite, feminine in tone, in the darkness. And Leonard talks about the darkness in a number of different ways, but one of the ways he talks about it is this way: I caught the darkness. It was drinking from your cup. Is this contagious? Just drink it up. It is contagious because of its reality. So Emerson has a little twist on this, which I like, about the confession. He says something. This is not the exact quote, but he says people talk about immortality. When they talk about immortality, they want to quote something. They quote to me, and he says, "Don't quote. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you know." That's the confession in Emerson. And the confession shows up all the time in great poetry. "If your life is a leaf that the seasons tear off and condemn, they will bind you with love that is graceful and green as a stem." not too hard to decipher that if your life is a leaf that the seasons tear off and condemn, is the ephemeral nature of life, the existential condition. This is what Plotinus, because he says we're strung between heaven and earth. You have the keen sense of being mortal, but you have an intuition of something that's not mortal, something that's eternal. And the struggle to figure that out is one of the great tortures of being a human being, you might say, until you find a path that begins to reconcile the tension of those opposites. So somehow in this song, the Sisters of Mercy have a part in this. They will bind you with love that is graceful and green as a stem. Bind to bind. Binding is something that Leonard likes to use a lot. And it has to do, I think, again, with the embrace. You give in to the embrace, there's the embrace, and then it becomes one. And so he repeats that in many, many songs. But again, the consolation is the theme here. And it runs all through the song, and it runs all through Leonard Cohen. And hopefully Alan and I will have a jolly good time unpacking some of this stuff. He has some wonderful ideas which we've begun to share with each other. So this is my opening salvo, you might say. When I left, they were sleeping. I hope you run into... let me try that again. When I left, they were sleeping. I hope you run into them soon. Don't turn on the lights. You can read their address by the moon. The sisters, you might say, appear to sleep during the day because they're like stars. This is a beautiful summer day, and the sun is the only star we can see. But as sun sets here in Moody Pond, twilight comes, the stars begin to appear. They've always been there. They're always there. But the Sisters of Mercy, you might say, the divine feminine, the muse, you have to listen soft enough. And so it's associated with the night, with moon, with silver, with water. And so he says they're asleep. He says that, I hope you run into them soon. You have to be fully exhausted to meet them. If you run into them, according to the way he's unfolding the song, I hope you run into them means I hope you get exhausted enough so that you meet them. That's the beauty of that, I think. Don't turn on the lights. You can read their address by the moon. That's where you find them. And you won't make me jealous if I hear that they've sweetened your night. The mystic is overjoyed to share the garden of love. The mystic is overjoyed to point to the gateway. Often what happens is you confess and point to it, and people think you're mad or you're crazy. And so when you mature a little bit, you shut up and you don't mention it. But he's saying if you should have this marvelous experience and you should confess it, then you're not going to make me jealous because it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to everyone. And if I've heard that it sweetened your night, the sweetening is an old Hindu idea, the idea that the bhakti devotional yoga practitioner seeks the sweetness of God, you might say. And we have hummingbirds all over the property here, and they drink sugar water, the sweetness of the sugar water. And they're just wonderful. You may even have heard some of them buzz by, I'm not sure, but my cinematographer says yes, they have buzzed him. So, we weren't lovers like that, and besides, it would still be all right. This is Cohen's way of saying, the sacred of the profane, the holy of the broken, hallelujah. If it's a real woman or the woman of mystery, the inner woman of mystery, they are part of the great conundrum of trying to figure this thing out. You can't figure it out. And so he insists that both be honored, the sacred and the profane. It doesn't matter what you heard, the holy or the broken. And there's this wonderful line that he gives us. Behold the gates of mercy in arbitrary space. There's the word mercy, Sisters of Mercy. Behold the gates of mercy in arbitrary space. Everywhere. Joseph Campbell said that the universe is pouring in its grace from every pore, every molecule, every atom. And Leonard is keenly aware of that. The next gateway is right in front of you. Not me. Okay, that's a little joke. I'm actually funnier than this most of the time. I usually tell jokes when I talk. I haven't done so today, but I may do an outtake reel at the end for some of that. So, finally, the final thing I want to say. So finally we come home to the confession and the experience of knowing that there's nothing to fear, and there's this invitation to the mystery, to the love, to the embrace. And I'll leave you with this last Leonard Cohen quote. So come, my friends, be not afraid. It is in love that we are made. In love we disappear. Thanks for listening, and I hope you read the essay when I finally publish it on Cohen-centric. And perhaps I'll see you again sometime soon. Thank you.